What about more
Absolutely.
overt things like leak in the roof, leak in the drywall? What's the best way to assess this? Do you recommend moisture meters? How do you attack it outside of like, hey, the drywall is wet. Hey, there's a water stain on the ceiling. How do you assess that?
Yeah, and that's the tough part. So we want to try and educate people to just keep their eyes out, right? So the first is, if there's any water at all within a home, it needs to be dry within 48 hours. 48 hours is your
Yes.
absolute cutoff before mold's going to start to grow. So if you see a problem, don't say, oh, I'm just going to wait and I'm just going to address it later. It needs to be dried quickly. So you want to use fans, dehumidifiers, and get that dried. If it's been longer than 48 hours, you have to be careful with fans because you can spread mold spores all around. But certainly drying is the key. Me personally, just one of the tips I like is every 12 to 18 months, I have my roofing contractor come out and inspect my roof. It's the most obvious source of potential water. And so we look at the roof often. And then, of course, you want to make sure you don't have flooding or any water up against external walls. The gutters are extended away from the foundation. Just think about keeping water off of your house. That's the key. Don't let landscaping slant towards the house. Just consider water has to be away.
Yeah, one of the big things I did that made a big difference is once we chatted, I think January, February this year, I am proactively hiring a roof guy to go up my roof, give him a couple $100, go in there, check out all the flashing, check out all the seams, make sure proactively there's no leaks. Best couple of $100 ever to spend. So 100% agree with that. I think everyone should be on top of that. Number two was we made sure our sub pumps were dialed in and they had individual battery power to it. So if there's ever an outage because of a flood, we have those sub pumps able to run on external battery sources. Any feedback on the sub pumps, which are basically a pump in between the concrete foundation and the ground to get that trapped water out? Any feedback on that?
You just got to keep it dry and monitor it. If I go and it looks like there's any growth in a sump pump, I might treat it, with peroxide, or some people can tolerate bleach. Of course, we don't like to promote bleach, but
Yeah.
just something to kind of treat it and make sure if you've got a sump pump, then you got to also have a dehumidifier because it's going to be humid down there.
Yep. Everyone, in my opinion, who's got a crawl space or a basement, just invest the money to have a whole house dehumidifier. It's worth it. I know people that have regular, dehumidifiers that aren't connected to a drain, and I can tell you by the end of the day, there's a gallon or two already filled, and those things are naturally set to trigger. Once it gets full, it stops dehumidifying. So you got to be changing it at least once to twice a day in heavy humidity months, and most people can't keep up with that.
Sure. And of course, where you are, that's a real problem. Where we are here in the desert Southwest, we have crawl spaces and we don't need dehumidifiers. But since you brought up crawl spaces, I do want
Yep.
to talk about that briefly, is that there's
Yep.
two ways to handle a crawl space. You either make it immaculate or you make it into a wind tunnel. And those are the only two ways to handle it and have a healthy crawl space. So it has to be just as clean as and pristine as your indoor environment, or you have to have a crawl space fan and draw the air through there so that you essentially get a negative pressure in the crawl space. So you don't get that air communicating up in your breathable air. So those are the only two ways to keep crawl spaces healthy.
Very good. What kind of simple tools can people get at home to assess what's happening in their home? So we have like a humidity detector. That's a simple
Mhm.
one, right? We know that. Anything 60 or up, we're really concerned. Are you concerned at 55%? Like, is that kind of still
You're
an
talking
issue for you?
statistics. Yeah, you're just talking statistics. If you're at 55, you might be at 60 somewhere, right? So it's just, don't play with fire.
Okay.
Keep it as low as you can.
And I'm not sure if we've kind of broken it down why humidity even matters. I'm going to go into my explanation and I'll give you a whack at it too. So basically, humidity is going to look at the saturation of water or moisture in the air.
Mhm.
And the more saturated the air is, the harder it is for water in your house to evaporate. So, like JW just said, after 48 hours, standing water is going to create mold. Why? Because it hasn't been evaporated. So the drier the air is, the greater chance that that air acts like a sponge and pulls that water up, therefore providing less chance for mold to grow. Is that a pretty good assessment?
That's pretty good. Let me throw
Okay.
this at you.
Yep.
Okay. So say you have dried fruit, right?
Yep.
Dried fruit doesn't grow mold, keep it on the shelf forever. If you have fresh fruit on the shelf a week, 2 weeks, it's starting to decay and break down. It's water activity. There's just more water in the fresh fruit and it allows the mold and bacteria to grow. If it's dry, it doesn't allow the mold and bacteria to grow. It's all about water activity.